We've already seen how important it is to place commas accurately within sentences. We've seen how not including them or putting them in the wrong place can result in sentences that clearly have completely different meanings. Let's now look at some more examples where the position of the comma has a very subtle, yet still significant impact on the meaning of the sentence. Before we do though, let's revisit some key concepts that we'll use. Firstly, embedded clauses are used to add detail to a noun, or to clarify which noun we're referring to. You can watch lesson 266 to learn more about embedded clauses. Secondly, the subject of a sentence is, in simple terms, what the sentence is about, and the subject always comes before the verb. You can watch lesson 262 to learn more about subjects. Okay, with these concepts in mind, let's take a look at the first example. Children who are well behaved get rewards. And now let's add a pair of commas. Children who are well behaved get rewards. So how do the commas change the meaning of the sentence? Well, let's start by identifying the subject in each sentence. That is, in simple terms, what or who the sentence is really about. In the first sentence, the subject is children who are well behaved. And in the second sentence, the subject is children. The embedded clause is just giving me extra detail about the subject, but it's not changing the subject. In fact, we know that embedded clauses are just another type of subordinate clause. So if we were to remove it from the sentence, we would be left with the main clause. Let's do that. Let's get rid of the embedded clause, as this will help us to understand the sentences more fully. Children get rewards. Great, so now let's come back to our question. How do the commas change the meaning of the sentence? Well, in the first sentence, who are the rewards given to? Well, they're given to children who are well behaved. Whereas in the second sentence, who are the rewards given to? Children. So how could we explain this in more detail? Well, the first sentence is telling the reader that only children who are well behaved will receive an award, whereas the second sentence is telling the reader that all children will receive an award and that children, should we wish to know, are well behaved. Sound tricky? Well, let's look at another example. Power stations, which use coal, are bad for the environment. Power stations which use coal are bad for the environment. Again, let's start by finding the subject. In the first sentence, the subject is power stations, and in the second sentence, the subject is power stations which use coal. Okay, so in the first sentence, if the subject is power stations, the embedded clause is just giving us a little more detail about those power stations. Let's imagine this embedded clause wasn't there, as it will help us to understand the difference in meaning between the two sentences. So, in the first sentence, we're telling the reader that all power stations are bad for the environment, and that, should the reader be interested, power stations happen to use coal. Whereas in the second sentence, we're telling the reader that power stations that use coal are bad for the environment, but not all power stations are bad for the environment, as not all power stations use coal. Okay, let's look at one final example. Oranges which are grown in Spain make fantastic juice. Oranges, which are grown in Spain, make fantastic juice. Which of these sentences tells the reader that oranges are only grown in Spain? Is it the first one or the second? Well, let's start by finding the subject. In the first sentence, it's oranges which are grown in Spain, whereas in the second sentence, the subject is oranges. The embedded clause is telling me a little bit more about those oranges. So what's it telling me? Well, it's telling me that oranges are grown in Spain. So that's the answer. It's the second sentence. So what does the first sentence mean then? Well, that's telling us that oranges are grown in a number of places, but those that are grown in Spain happen to make fantastic juice. As you can see, changing the position of commas can have a very subtle yet significant impact on the meaning of the sentence. With harder sentences, it may be helpful to first identify the subject of the sentence, as this will tell you who or what the sentence is really about.